Europe did not fall into World War I overnight. Long before 1914, the ground was already shaking, borders were already bleeding, and empires were already cracking. One small region carried all that tension like a loaded gun: the Balkans. Why did this corner of Europe explode into war before the rest of the continent? How did a conflict between small nations shake a centuries-old empire? And why did the First Balkan War quietly prepare the world for the catastrophe that would soon follow? In this video, I'm going to explain how this war began, what really happened on the battlefields, and why its consequences made a global war almost inevitable. So without any delay, let's start. For centuries, the Balkans had been ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Once feared across Europe, by the early 20th century the empire was no longer the unstoppable force it once was. It was often called the sick man of Europe, struggling with internal decay, economic weakness, nationalist uprisings, and constant pressure from European powers. Across the Balkans, Christian populations, Serbs, Bulgarians, Greeks, and Montenegrins, were growing increasingly restless under Ottoman rule. These groups were no longer just dreaming of autonomy, they wanted full independence and territorial expansion. At the same time, nationalism was spreading like wildfire. Each Balkan nation believed history, culture, and blood gave them the right to lands still controlled by the Ottomans. Macedonia, Thrace, Kosovo, these were not just territories, they were symbols. Every village, every church, every mountain pass mattered. But the problem was simple and deadly. All these nations wanted the same lands. The Ottoman Empire stood in the middle, weakened but still holding on, while Europe watched closely, knowing any spark here could ignite something far larger. Behind the scenes, the great powers were deeply involved. Russia supported Slavic nations like Serbia and Bulgaria, hoping to expand its influence and weaken the Ottomans. Austria-Hungary feared Serbian expansion, seeing it as a threat to its own fragile multi-ethnic empire. Britain and France were concerned with maintaining balance, while Germany quietly supported its Ottoman ally. The Balkans were not just a regional issue, they were a chessboard for global power politics. In 1912, something unprecedented happened. Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro, historic rivals, set aside their differences and formed the Balkan League. Their goal was clear: drive the Ottoman Empire out of Europe once and for all. This alliance was fragile, built on mutual hatred of Ottoman rule rather than trust in one another. Secret treaties divided up Ottoman territories in advance, especially Macedonia, planting the seeds for future conflict even before the war began. The Ottomans were unprepared. Years of internal rebellion, poor administration, and outdated military structures had left their European forces vulnerable. When Montenegro declared war in October 1912, it was the opening shot of the First Balkan War. Within days, the rest of the Balkan League followed. What came next shocked Europe. The Ottoman armies collapsed faster than anyone expected. Serbia advanced southward with speed and determination, defeating Ottoman forces in Kosovo and pushing deep into Macedonia. Bulgaria launched massive offensives in Thrace, winning decisive battles and driving Ottoman troops back toward Constantinople itself. Greek forces moved through Thessaly and captured key cities, while the Greek navy dominated the Aegean Sea, cutting off Ottoman reinforcements and isolating their armies. Montenegro laid siege to strategic fortresses, stretching Ottoman defenses even thinner. The speed of the Balkan victories stunned European observers. In a matter of weeks, the Ottomans lost most of their remaining European territories. Cities that had been under Ottoman control for centuries fell one after another. Refugees flooded the roads. Entire communities were uprooted. Ethnic violence erupted as armies advanced and retreated, leaving civilians caught in the middle. The war was not just a military collapse, it was a humanitarian disaster. One of the most significant battles took place in Thrace, where Bulgarian forces came dangerously close to Constantinople. For the first time in generations, the Ottoman capital itself felt vulnerable. Panic spread through Ottoman leadership. European powers grew nervous. No one wanted the complete collapse of the Ottoman Empire to destabilize the region beyond control. Diplomatic pressure began to mount, even as fighting continued. Yet beneath the surface of victory, cracks were already forming within the Balkan League. Serbia, blocked from access to the Adriatic Sea by the creation of Albania under European pressure, began to demand more territory in Macedonia. Bulgaria, which believed it had earned the largest share due to its military contribution, refused to compromise. Greece, having secured key ports and islands, was determined to protect its gains. The alliance that had defeated an empire was already turning inward, driven by greed, fear, and nationalist dreams. As the Ottomans sued for peace, negotiations began in London. The Treaty of London would officially strip the Ottoman Empire of almost all its European possessions. On paper, the Balkan states had achieved their goal, but peace was an illusion. Borders were drawn without real agreement. Resentment grew. Armies remained mobilized. The war had solved one problem while creating many more. The First Balkan War fundamentally changed the balance of power in Southeast Europe. The Ottoman Empire was pushed back to the edges of the continent, humiliated and weakened beyond recovery. Serbia emerged stronger and more confident, alarming Austria-Hungary. Bulgaria, dissatisfied and angry, felt betrayed by its former allies. Greece expanded its influence, while Montenegro secured modest gains. But stability did not follow victory. Instead, the region became more volatile than ever. Most importantly, the war sent a dangerous message to Europe. Empires could fall quickly, alliances could shift overnight, and regional wars could spiral out of control. Military planners, politicians, and nationalist movements took notes. The Balkans had proven that war was no longer a distant threat, it was a living reality. The powder keg had not been diffused, it had been shaken violently. And as the guns fell silent in 1913, the world failed to realize one crucial truth. This war was not an ending, it was a rehearsal. As the fighting intensified, it became clear that the Ottoman Empire was no longer the dominant force it once had been in Europe. The Balkan League armies pushed forward on multiple fronts, overwhelming Ottoman defenses with speed and coordination that surprised even their own leaders. Serbian forces advanced deep into Macedonia, capturing key cities like Skopje and Monastir, cutting off Ottoman supply lines and destroying entire field armies. Bulgaria, meanwhile, launched massive offensives in Thrace, marching relentlessly toward Constantinople itself. Battles such as Kirk-Kalis and Lule-Burgas became decisive moments where Ottoman troops collapsed under pressure, suffering heavy losses and retreating in disarray. For the first time in centuries, the Ottomans faced the real possibility of being pushed completely out of Europe. Bulgarian forces reached the Chatalia Line, the last defensive barrier protecting Constantinople. Panic spread through the Ottoman capital as refugees flooded the city, carrying stories of defeat, massacres, and destruction. The empire that had once terrified Europe now struggled to defend its own doorstep. Disease, poor logistics, outdated command structures, and internal political chaos weakened Ottoman resistance. Soldiers often lacked food, ammunition, and medical care, while commanders argued over strategy and authority. At sea, Greece played a decisive role. The Greek navy, modernized and led by skilled officers, secured control of the Aegean Sea. By defeating the Ottoman fleet, Greece prevented Ottoman reinforcements from moving between Asia and Europe. This naval dominance allowed Greece to capture key islands, including Lesbos and Chios, further shrinking Ottoman influence. Without naval support, Ottoman armies in Europe were isolated, making defeat almost inevitable. Yet, even as victory seemed assured, cracks began to appear within the Balkan League itself. The alliance had been built on shared hatred of Ottoman rule, not on trust among its members. As Ottoman territories fell, old rivalries surfaced. Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro all wanted control over the same lands, especially Macedonia. Bulgaria believed it deserved the largest share based on pre-war agreements and its military sacrifices. Serbia and Greece, however, had no intention of surrendering territory they had conquered with blood. What had begun as a united war against a common enemy was slowly transforming into a competition among allies. International pressure mounted as the war reshaped the map of Southeast Europe. The great powers, Britain, France, Russia, Austria-Hungary, and Germany, watched with growing concern. Russia supported the Slavic states, particularly Serbia and Bulgaria, but feared losing control over them. Austria-Hungary was alarmed by Serbia's expansion, seeing it as a direct threat to its own stability, especially given its large Slavic population. Germany backed the Ottomans diplomatically, while Britain sought to maintain balance and prevent chaos near vital trade routes. The First Balkan War officially ended with the Treaty of London in May 1913. The Ottoman Empire lost almost all its European territories, retaining only a small area around Constantinople. Albania was created as an independent state, largely to block Serbian access to the Adriatic Sea, a decision that enraged Serbia and increased its hostility toward Austria-Hungary. The Balkans were transformed overnight, but peace was fragile and deeply unstable. No one was satisfied with the settlement. Every nation believed it had been cheated, and every victory felt incomplete. The human cost of the war was devastating. Tens of thousands of soldiers were killed, and countless civilians suffered displacement, famine, and violence. Ethnic tensions intensified as populations were uprooted, massacres occurred, and revenge killings spread across contested regions. The war introduced a new level of brutality to the region, normalizing violence as a political tool. These scars would not heal quickly. Instead, they would deepen resentments and fuel future conflicts. Most importantly, the First Balkan War shattered the illusion of stability in Europe. It proved that empires could collapse rapidly, alliances could shift overnight, and small regional wars could draw in global powers. The conflict emboldened nationalist movements and exposed the weakness of diplomatic systems designed to prevent war. Austria-Hungary, increasingly fearful of Serbian ambition, began planning more aggressive responses. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic nations, felt compelled to stand firm against Austrian pressure. Germany pledged unwavering support to Austria-Hungary, while France aligned more closely with Russia. Europe was becoming polarized, armed, and ready for confrontation. The First Balkan War did not cause World War I by itself, but it created the conditions that made a larger conflict inevitable. It destabilized the Balkans, intensified rivalries, and demonstrated how quickly violence could spiral beyond control. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo just 1 year later, the diplomatic fault lines exposed by the Balkan Wars cracked open completely. The alliances, fears, and ambitions shaped during this war would ignite a global catastrophe. In the end, the First Balkan War stands as a warning from history. It shows how unresolved nationalism, collapsing empires, and competing ambitions can turn regional conflicts into global disasters. It reminds us that wars don't happen in isolation. They build upon past grievances, unfinished business, and political failures. And as Europe learned in 1914, the price of ignoring those warning signs can be devastating. And now, I want to ask you, do you think World War I could have been avoided if the Balkan conflicts had been handled differently, or was Europe already doomed to explode into war? Share your thoughts in the comments.